Video number 98 from MythoReligio series, Book 4. The Lost Paradise of Atlantis, Lemuria, and Mu, Part 1. Dear fellow truth seekers, in my past few videos I've been sharing information about various artifacts from around the world that seem to prove that our ancestors might have the ability to navigate the skies using flying machines, and/or aliens had visited our planet in the distant past. These artifacts have led several researchers to theorize that we, Homo sapiens, are descendants of these ancient aliens that intermingled with other more primitive hominids that have lived on our planet. Another alternative theory that tries to explain where our ancestors came from is the Atlantis-Lemuria-Mu theory. According to legends, these three places were sunken and simply disappeared at the dawn of humanity. Atlantis is the most famous legend of these three. Many places in the world have been proposed as its location. So up from this video onward, I'll be starting a new playlist with all the information that I could find concerning these sunken paradises that have been puzzling us for millennia. Atlantis has been compared to many mythological places, such as the Sumerian Edenu, which sounds similar to the biblical Eden, and the Aztecs Aztlan, which sounds similar to Atlantis. The Western world first learned the tale of Atlantis and its destruction from the writing of the Greek philosopher Plato. Atlantis is a legendary island that was mentioned in Plato's dialogues Timaeus and Critias. Plato heard the story from an older philosopher named Solon, circa 638 until 559 BCE. Solon was one of the 7 acknowledged wise men of ancient Greece. He earned his fame as the founder of the Athenian democracy when the city was facing a severe crisis. After proposing the execution of the new system in Athens, he was pressured by many questions and demands. He knew that in great affairs you cannot please all parties. So he made an excuse to sail away from Greece for 10 years in the hope that during this period the Athenians would become accustomed to this new law. He traveled to Egypt because for the ancient Greeks, Egypt was the fountain of knowledge. In Egypt, he spent some time discussing philosophy with 2 Egyptian priests, Xenophis of Heliopolis and Sonches of Sais. The high priest Sonches revealed the tale of Atlantis and its destruction 9,000 years before their conversation took place at around 560 BCE, thus placing the fall of Atlantis at around 9,560 BCE, or around 12,000 years ago. He told the story about the pious men of Atlantis who lived in peace and prosper until they finally became corrupted, and the gods punished them with worldwide earthquake of extraordinary violence and overwhelming flood. Like any other stories or myth around the world, once it was told to a person from a certain race, the story adjusted its environment into its nationality. This can be very confusing, of course. Solon, being a Greek, then told the tale of Atlantis as if it was of Greek origin, as follows. In the earliest of times, when the gods were dividing the earth among themselves, Poseidon chose the fair and bounteous continent and subsidiary islands that would come to be known as Atlantis. There, with a woman named Leto, he sired 5 sets of twin sons. The firstborn was Atlas, for whom the continent and the surrounding ocean were named. Poseidon divided Atlantis into 10 parts, granting Atlas the biggest and best portion and making him sovereign over his brothers, who were made rulers over the remaining provinces. Atlantis was a land of bountiful plains, extensive timber, and rich flora and fauna, including great herds of elephants. The ground was seen with the ore of gold, silver, and other metals, including a mysterious one called orichalcum, a copper that sparkled like fire. At the southern end of the continent, the kings built a city of magnificence to match the great power that so rich a land soon achieved. This city, also called Atlantis, consisted of concentric rings of land and waterways. In the center, on a high hill where Poseidon and Cleito had conceived Atlas and his twin brothers, the Atlanteans raised a great temple to Poseidon with a statue of the god riding a golden chariot through the sea in the company of dolphins. In the city there were springs both hot and cold, some for the use of the kings, others for the citizens, still others for the beasts of burden. The outer rings held a racecourse and houses for the citizens. The inner harbor were filled with vessels of war. It was not long before Atlantis, gifted with wealth, strength, and interval harmony, began to extend its power outward. But at the same time, the divine and virtuous character of its populace had begun to weaken with the passage of years. Human nature gained the upper hand. They began to exhibit less seemly qualities, uncurbed ambition, greed, and ugliness grew among the citizens and their rulers as well. Perceiving that an honorable race was in a woeful plight, Zeus summoned the gods to determine what punishment to inflict on Atlantis. A war broke. Terrible earthquakes and floods then sank the once blessed continent into the depths of the sea. Similar tales have been told all over the world, with many nations claiming the story to be of their nation origin. Dwaraka of the Indian, Shurupak of the Sumerian, Aztlan of the Aztec, and we don't even know what it's called in the original story told to Plato. It must have been an Egyptian name. And of its hero in many different nation names: Coxcox, Ziusudra, Utnapishtim, Nuwa, and of course the most famous is Noah. For over 2,500 years, people in the West have been obsessed in finding the whereabouts of this sunken paradise continent, this earthly Eden. The obsession cools down for quite some time during the period known as the Dark Ages, where European scholars turn their attention almost exclusively from worldly matters to theology and the business of the church. Atlantis was for many centuries a matter of relatively small concern. But with the coming of the Renaissance, many Western thinkers returned hungrily to the classic texts of Greece and Rome, and there, once again, they found Atlantis. Since then, thousands of books concerning this topic have been printed all over the world. Some authors believe that Atlantis was most probably the same location where the biblical flood took place. As in the Bible, some believe that Atlantis was the cradle of civilization and that different great civilizations had sprung from the offspring of the survivors of Atlantis. Therefore, many highly advanced civilizations in the world look as if they just sprang from nowhere. One of the most famous books about Atlantis was written by Ignatius Donnelly, a U.S. congressman 1831-1901, who rewrote the history of mankind from this Atlantis account. Other books that are often quoted as a source of additional information about Atlantis are books that were written based on the information about Atlantis by Edgar Cayce. Cayce was an American psychic who was more famous with the nickname of the Sleeping Prophet. He prophesied things in the future and told of events from the past while he was asleep or in a trance. A few times during his sleeping prophecies, he talked about Atlantis and how the people lived back then. Strange enough, some of his descriptions about Atlantis match Plato's account. However, he never could remember what he prophesied as soon as he woke up. Many historians or archaeologists and also laymen were obsessed with finding the location of Atlantis. There have been many locations proposed for the location of this mythical place. Some are more or less serious attempts at legitimate scholarly or archaeological works. Others have been made by psychic or other pseudo-scientific means. Many of the proposed sites share some of the characteristics of the Atlantis story: water, catastrophic end, relevant time period, but so far none have been proven conclusively to be the historical Atlantis if it really existed. Dear fellow truth seekers, in my next few videos I will be sharing the places that have been proposed as the location of Atlantis. I have my own theory whether Atlantis really existed and its connection to the overall prehistory of humanity, but I cannot share it yet. I will do it when it is time to do so, after sharing all the information needed to draw a conclusion. Right now, I'm just sharing all the information that I can gather on this topic. At the meantime, allow me to thank you for watching and hope to see you in my next video.